Okay, welcome back everybody to the Many Hats Club Isolation Con, or if you're just joining us, welcome. Great to have you here. It's been an awesome day of talks so far. The GoFundMe page is via the Many Hats Club Twitter. If you go and check that out, I think we're £4 away from £7,000, which is incredible. If somebody can get us over that £7,000 in the next half hour. Otherwise, I will get my wallet out again. Coming up soon, we've got Ed Tucker, Tanya She Hacks Purple, and James Bohr. But for now, over to Sulphur. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi there, hi all. I'm going to speak to you today about incident preparedness, or helping a low maturity organization on a tight budget. So who am I? Well, I'm a 24/7 security operations center manager, nearly 10 years in security, always team blue, raft of letters after my name. Fun fact, started my career as a broadcast journalist. And if you couldn't tell from the slides, I'm a fan of the Lovecraft mythos. And this is my first talk, so be kind. So, incident preparedness. In my opinion, this is the most valuable thing any organization can do. It can cost nothing and make all the difference. With being prepared, when an incident occurs, you will know how to use your tools, what actions to take, when to take them. And I really like this quote. I think it sums it up quite well. I mean, you can have the best incident responders in the business, but without direction, they will not be incident ready. So we're going to get incident ready, and how we're going to do that? Well, we're going to assess our maturity. We're going to bring in some stakeholders. We're going to play some Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to run some simulations. If you do all four of them, you'll be incident ready. So, assessing your incident response maturity. So first of all, we need a maturity model. Now, a maturity model is a tool that will help you assess the current effectiveness of your organization in whatever goal you're attempting to do. It'll also tell you what you need to do in order to level up. So if you were to go to a maturity model shop to get one of these maturity models, there's a few caveats. Number one, all maturity models need to be designed around your organization. You need to tweak it, you need to adjust it. So none of them will perfectly reflect your organization. So be prepared to put in some work there. Caveat two, pick a time frame. Set yourself a period of time to use this maturity model. I'd recommend probably about 3 years, and assess every year. And caveat three, understand the problem you're trying to address. So in this space, we're going to be looking at incident preparedness and incident response. So a maturity model that I like to use, or retrofit a maturity model out of, is the National Cybersecurity Center's CAF framework, the Cyber Assessment Framework. It's developed by NCSC, and it's used as a way to measure if an organization is adequately managing cybersecurity risks. It is a baseline for all CNI providers. Now, the CAF's made up of several objectives. You've got Objective A, managing security risks, Objective C, detecting cybersecurity events. But for our maturity model, for incident preparedness, we're going to focus on Objective D, minimizing the impact of a cybersecurity incident. And if you drill down into Objective D, you have 5 subcategories. You've got D1A, response plan, you've got D1C, testing and exercising, D2B, using incidents to drive improvements. So each of these kind of sums up which areas you need to kind of focus on. And if you drill down into these a little bit more, you'll get what you call these statements. And they're split into kind of 3 categories. You've got not achieved statements, partially achieved statements, and achieved statements. So, for example, your company might not have an incident response plan, in which case you're firmly in that not achieved. You might look at that achieved column and say, actually, we do have a response plan, which is based on clear understanding of our risks to network, and they're around our essential functions. And when I look at these kind of table of not achieved and achieved, I see gap assessment fuel. Now, gap assessments are really easy to do. What you do is you take your current situation and you pop it down in one corner, and then you go to your future outcomes. That's what you want to achieve. Pop it in the other side, and then you work your way backwards. So for example, if you wanted a response plan to cover all your essential functions, the first thing you probably want to do is document them all. Then you want to map your threats to your essential functions, and then you want to draft response plans for those critical assets based on the likely threats and impacts. Now, then you actually have to go and do the hard work, and it is hard work drafting these response plans. But once you've done it, once you've done the grunt work, I'd recommend reporting it up to your senior management using your maturity roadmap, which of those assessments where you weren't achieving and what work you've done to make it so that your company now achieves it, and then report that up. Give it to management. Management love it when they see good percentages increasing. They show that the hard work you've been doing is recognized. So to kind of summarize that, you've got to understand the problem first, speak to people about what they see that their problem is in for incident response. You've got to pick the CAF objectives. Remember, not all CAF objectives apply, and you can add additional ones. Your organization is unique, so treat it as such. Create a gap assessment, really easy to do, and it will help set out a roadmap for the next period. Then work on bridging that gap. That's where the hard work comes in, but spend time, do it well, and then report on success. Management loves successes, make sure you give them the good news. So once you've done that, we can talk about bringing in key stakeholders. So you've done your maturity model, you've created a response plan, you've disseminated it out to your stakeholders. The next thing you want to do is test that response plan. And it needs to be tested at the high level as well as the low level. And that's to ensure that A, your bosses have confidence in your team dealing with an incident, and that your response plan satisfies your stakeholder needs during an incident. And the best way to bring those points out is to do a tabletop exercise. A few caveats here. You have to do a tabletop exercise with a process to test. If you're bringing a half-written process or no process to the table, it's not worth your time. It'll make you look bad. Don't do it. Caveat 2, ensure all your stakeholders are present. And if they can't be present, make sure they're informed. So for those of you who don't know, a tabletop exercise is really just a discussion-based session where we sit around a table, we discuss the roles during an emergency and the responses that each kind of team would take to a particular dire situation. And here's a couple of tips I've learned. So as I said before, have an incident management process to test. That's really important. Tip 2, pick a scenario that is relevant to the business. You're getting your boss's mates in a room here. You don't want to waste their time by going through a zombie apocalypse. You want to make sure it's relevant to that business. Tip 3, avoid being too technical. While it's really easy to get stuck in the weeds in a technical conversation, you might think it's succeeding or working to a goal. It won't be. Your goal here is to test your response plan at the high level. Tip 4, minute it. Your whole tabletop exercise is trying to find the kinks in your response plan. And whenever someone brings up an issue, you want to write that down. You want to be able to go back and address that issue. So really do minute it and have a facilitator. We'll get on to why a facilitator is really important. And tip 5, when you have everyone in that room, then there's the best time to establish a group with these individuals to follow up on that exercise. So there might be some actions that fall out with it. Get the stakeholders in a room to agree then and there that they're going to help fix it. So I mentioned that the facilitator's role was key to finding those kinks. So firstly, when you're doing these tabletop exercises, you'll be going through the incident and a facilitator will inject prompts into it. And these prompts are based on A, the knowledge of the business and best practice. When you combine the two of those, it will really test that response plan and your assumed knowledge of that business. So for example, when a facilitator asks, are documents received through an email opened in protected mode? They're asking that because A, it's a best practice due to NIST controls. B, the mail team's also participating on that exercise. And C, we know that the organization uses O365. So it's very relevant to ask. And the best thing is all of these prompts are actually actions which will address a kink in your plan. So prompt number 1, would the mail team be able to block an email based on a subject line? If the people in that room don't know, that's fine. Just assign an action out to a particular team or a stakeholders team to, can we actually find that out? Because I'm reliant on that in my response plan. And each prompt, every action. And then once you've done all those actions and you've got all those answers, publish those results. Your incident response plan should be available to everyone who needs to have it. So put it out there and put out the results of your tabletop exercise. Objective, we tested our incident response process for a large scale mail campaign. Result, there's a little bit of confusion as to which team would be responsible for sending out the all staff comms. The action, well, I went ahead and I made a RACI matrix, which was added to that response plan, which outlines who is responsible for comms. And again, push that out so your management know you're doing good stuff. So summarize, you had a maturity model, it said you needed a response plan, you wrote a response plan, you sent it around for comments, then you got all your stakeholders together and you tested out that process. You had a few issues, you work out the kinks. And then again, report on your success. Management loves success. Once you've done that, then you can go and play some Dungeons and Dragons. So how do you know that your incident response teams will be able to follow the incident response plan? Now, you've just written a very high level piece, and now you've got a low level piece of each step your incident responders are going to do. What you need to do is you test them individually. And the cheapest way to do that is to play some D&D with them. So you're going to be the dungeon master. And you're going to sit down your incident responder and you're going to give them kind of questions and answer rounds, like they're a creature in a dungeon. You're literally going to say, right, you've walked into the room. How would you solve scenario X? What would you do? So pick a realistic scenario. For example, phishing email. Sit down and then go to town on that instant. What you want to do is draw up every correct answer that your team should do for that. So every tool you have that can be used to help you solve a phishing incident. Then off the back of that, create artifacts of doing the correct action. So for example, if someone said, well, I'd check open source intelligence on that, pre-prepare an artifact of open source intelligence so you can provide them with those results. Break down the incident into phases, so make it aligned to the NIST phases of incident response. And then score the actions. Some actions are more important. And then step 6, play out the scenario. So this will help explain what I mean. So you sit your analysts down and you give them a phishing email, and it might look like that. And then you ask that analyst, right, what would you do when a user reports that they have received this email? And you give them some time to look at the email, and then you can come back and say, right, what would you do? And hopefully they'll go through the actions they would take. And then you can score those actions. So you can say, right, well, did you create a ticket? If you did, great. Here's your artifact of having an incident number and 2 points. Did you give a priority on that ticket? Oh, you did? You gave it high for quite an obvious spam? I'm going to give you -1 points for that. What category was the ticket? Spam? Great, I love MI. And you go through it and you keep asking them, what else would you do? What else would you do? What else would you do? And you try to bring them on track. So if they say, well, I'd go and grab the email header and then I'd go and analyze it and I'd get the subject line and sender and recipient, and then I'd go and search for that on our mail gateway to see if any other emails been sent through, just stop them. Say, no, yeah, you're at this stage of the triage phase. All I'm after is what you do in this round. Don't worry, there'll be other rounds later where you can go and take that email artifacts and do your searches. And you go through each phase. And then you might go to the next phase, for example, which might be, right, well, that URL now goes to an 0365 fake login page. What would you do now? And again, you keep asking them, what would you do? What would you do? What would you do? Until you get to the end of all their responses. And what I really like doing, why I really like doing this activity is because your analysts will be thinking on their feet, and they may come up with a solution or a response task that you might not have thought of that might actually be better than the response task you thought of. And you know what you can do? You can take that and you can add it to your incident response plans, and then you have a better incident response process off the back of it. And again, you know, test for level of detail. So did they search for internet access logs to that site? If they said, yeah, great, give them, you know, say 100 people visited that site, here's the artifact, and I'll give you 2 points. But did you notice that the site was unencrypted and that you could actually search for HTTP posts? And that way you would actually know which users have entered their credentials into it. If so, you did. Clever analyst, here's 10 points. Did you enter honeypot credits? Great, here's 5 points. Let's see if you do something with that later. And again, you go through, and every time they say they do an action, you give them an artifact or the results of it. And again, they might do something that's bad. They might click on a link, they might investigate the site in an unsafe manner, in which case, negative points. Some actions are worse than actually correct actions. And what you do is you go through each phase. So you'll triage, the analyze, the contain, and the recover. What I like to do is start with a really, you know, benign spam email and work its way up to actually this led to an O365 fake login page in which 1,000 of our users entered their credentials and we need a major incident call. And I like to play the role of the bad boss in the major incident call and hammer at analysts. So what would you do? What would you recommend? Are we blocking the analysts? Are we blocking the people who clicked on it? Are we blocking the people who entered details? And you go all the way through, all the way to actually recover. And this whole session shouldn't take longer than an hour. And the best thing about it is at the end of it, once you've scored them up, you can actually put together a nice, pretty graph about how your teams were doing. So for example, you could look at this and say, wow, shift 1 did really well. Oh, sorry, shift 4 did really well and shift 1 didn't do too well. What I might do, I'll swap that team up a bit. Or you might look at it and say, you know what, I'm pretty good at recovery. All my teams knew what to do. They kind of failed on containment though. So I'm going to go back to my documentation and I'm going to, you know, look at that, see if I can improve upon it. And then when I rerun this test in 6 months' time, hopefully they'll get better scores. And again, if they do get better scores, show it to your senior management. Say, look, my guys have got better now at following incident response processes. They're now hitting nearly 80% of everything they should be doing for an incident. So, bear with me. So the next thing you want to do is a cyber simulation. So you've got your maturity model. You've got a process in place. You've got stakeholder buy-in because of your tabletop exercise. You've got your analysts ready because you've tested them in that D&D scenario. The next thing you want to do is a real-life test. And as Mike Tyson eloquently put it, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you're going to now need to punch people in the mouth. The way you do that is with cyber simulations. You make them as realistic as possible. If you can, get your red teams involved. Make as much use as the technology will allow. If you've got technical people who can help, get them involved. Now, this is very technical as opposed to tabletop exercise. So what you should do is avoid senior management involvement. Let them know that you are testing, but that is very much aimed at the technical level. And you want to operate in a no-fault environment so that when gaps do appear, teams are encouraged to think on their feet. And it's great if gaps appear because that outcome will be better documentation, potentially new rule sets, and potentially new business opportunities. So some of the ways you can do a cyber simulation is, like I said, you can get an internal team, you know, be it purple team, threat hunting, red teaming, whoever you can with technical skill sets, you can emulate an adversary, or you can go and get a product-based offering, be it Atomic Red Team, or you can pay for it. But what I like to use is a simulation from NCSC's Exercise in a Box. What that is it's just a script that causes beaconing to a server every 10 seconds. Kind of emulates the C2 beaconing out your network. What I like to do is I go find a randomer on the floor and I say, hi, I want you to run this script from your machine. I want you to sit somewhere where you don't normally sit. And so they go off for an hour and sit somewhere else. And then what I do is I go grab my analysts and say, look, we've got beaconing on your network. I want you to find out what's beaconing. I want you to go grab that information. Then I want you to go find out the physical location of it. And I want you to grab the machine that's doing the beaconing and bring it to me. And you've got to do it in under an hour. That's a really cool test to do because it makes your analysts think, you know what? Hey, how am I going to link beaconing from my network to actually finding it physically in here? And they have to put their heads together and think, actually, the Wi-Fi access points might give it away, the IP, the internal IP location, and they can work it out. And it's a great little hunt. And of course, report on those results. Give it a cool name like Operation Trentstone. Management love cool names. State what it was about. We aim to test the blue team response to ransomware. State your achievements. Look, 4 out of 5 of my teams were able to resolve this incident in under an hour. That's fantastic. And 5 new alerting use cases have been created off the back of this operation. Even better. And we've got 1 new opportunity to implement SOAR for faster instant response. Great. Well, you've already got instant buy-in, stakeholder buy-in because of your tabletop exercise, and people are believing you're working well. So if they've got confidence in you, when you say, I have a new opportunity for them, they'll happily spend that money. So to summarize, instant preparedness, in my opinion, is the most valuable thing any organization can do. It can cost you nothing, and it will make all the difference. You do it by knowing the business, running maturity gauging activities like matching to a framework, and speaking with key stakeholders. Then you test at the high level with key stakeholders. This is a tabletop exercise where you ensure everyone knows what processes are needed and what their roles and responsibilities are. And then you drill into the low-level detail of incident responders. You spend time, you test out those incidents, you make sure every tool is used, you make sure that you couldn't do anything more in that incident response plan. And you make sure it's all documented and all your response teams know how to do everything. And then you test as close to real life as possible and you see where the theoretical doesn't match up with reality. And if you do all of that, hopefully you'll be incident ready. Thank you. That's my talk. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If that was your first ever talk, I'm not sure I believe you because that was fantastic. Some really great content there, and there's been some great feedback there on the Twitch channel as well. There's a couple of questions. We might be able to sneak both in if we're fairly quick. So first off, when you have bad news, how do you present it to a customer with little to no knowledge in the subject matter?
When you have bad news, how do you present it to a customer? So probably gently. So that customer, because there's little knowledge of what you're doing for them, that's actually probably your fault. You need to educate the people about what you're offering them. If they think they're getting a great service from you, and in reality it's just a log and flog shop, then that's at your fault. You need to highlight that so that when it comes down to you being open and honest about the service and you have bad news that, we've been breached, there's always a silver lining to it, right? So, we've been breached, but we were ready for it. And if another company or another incident response team was in place, it'd be far worse. So try to look for the positives and be open and honest with them.
Oh, fantastic. And just one more then for the last couple of minutes. What's the best way for a threat intelligence team to provide support to an incident response team?
Okay, so what the threat intelligence team should be doing should be looking at generating what you'd call intel. So they're shoring up your SIEM alerts. They're going out and getting the latest and making sure the most relevant threat intelligence, providing that to your teams. And that should be BAU. Then during an incident, they should be sitting next to your incident responders, ready to run searches on any artifacts you discover during an incident. So be it, let's say there's a file hash, you want them looking across all of their sources for that hash of that file, or it might be some beaconing, or it might be, this is a tool, what potentially threat actors are there, or just other stuff like, we're not a massive organization. We probably won't be hit out of, we'll be hit like most people in a mass mail campaign. So let's see what other companies are chatting about. Let's see if other people are suffering from this incident, and let's see if there's any solutions to it. So two things really, that preparation side, and then actively side by side with your incident response.
Fantastic. Look, unfortunately, we're out of time. There's quite a few questions coming in on Twitch, and the feedback has been fantastic. So thank you so much, Sulphur. I guess follow on Twitter if you want to maybe ask some follow-up questions, and I'm sure we'll be willing to answer them. Once again, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time. We've got Ed coming up in about 5 minutes. So thanks, everyone. See you soon.